Okay, so hello, welcome back to my channel. Now after you have seen my previous video on how to install C, Dev C++, Python and PyCharm, now we have the ground ready, but we should still know how to play, right? So let us learn how to play with coding. In coding it's not really that complicated. We can I have a simple way where we can start to learn how to coding in a very simple process. Okay, first thing in coding is we have to know how coding works. Coding is similar to talking to the computer with the help of a middle person, and this middle person is our programming languages. There are multiple different programming languages. Different languages are good at different things. For example, if you take Python is generally good for AI ML sort of stuff, so artificial intelligence, neural networks, data science, this kind of stuff Python is very good at. We have, let's say, C. It is generally very good at doing some sort of very low complex level things. For example, IDEs, compilers, game engines, this kind of stuff, and mainly operating system. For example, the Linux is mostly built around C. The entire operating system is built on C. So for that type of stuff, C is really useful. We have Java, with which you can kind of build apps, websites, and many things. Okay, so to put it simply, if we take a computer, it normally speaks in binary. If we take our human, at least in terms of computer, we human generally speak in English. That is because it's really the most common language used. Okay, apart from Mandarin Chinese, but globally speaking, English is more common. Now since we mostly use English, all the coding syntax is all done in such a way that it's kind of between binary and English. Okay, so when it's closer to our English, we call it a high level programming languages. So things like Java, Python, these we call high level programming languages because they are closer to our English. But when we take few languages like assembly, they are closer to the CPU, the binary language, hence we call them a low level languages. Now the C is a special case where it used to be kind of an high level language compared to assembly, but now compared to Java, C has few low level controls with things like pointer. So C is kind of in a unique way where it has few high level components and low level components. I like to kind of call it in a medium level, but the reality is it has few low level language components and high level language components. Regardless, how do you start coding? Okay, now the first concept you want to know in coding is called a data types and variables. Okay, if you are confused on how where you can access this, there is one simple link called W3 School. Okay, W3 School, it has almost the syntax of every programming language that we generally use. So Python, C. For this tutorial we can take C. Okay, like this it will tell us how everything works, everything. So let us go one by one. Okay, now if we go to, let us say, data types. Okay, as we can see, these are multiple different data types and variables. So what are data types, what are variables? Okay, data types and variables are really very simple. Now in programs, we generally have to store data, right? That's how we can run anything. Okay, so for example, even if I want to add two numbers, okay, let's say I want to add 2 plus 2. Okay, 2 plus 2, unless I have some sort of way to store the value 2, I won't be able to process them. So the way we store them is in variables. Okay, variables are used to store data, but computer is not smart enough to say what kind of data are we storing. So depending on the languages, we have to explicitly say which type of data we are storing. And how do we know what data is there, which type of data is there? No need to worry, they are just mainly 4 to 5 types. Once you know what are they, it's really simple. The first data type is what we call an integer. Okay, integer, or what we generally call as number. So for example, like 1, 2, -1, -2, etc. In the programming community, it generally has a limit of 2.1 trillion, okay, to minus 2.1 trillion. Okay, it is based on a simple power value 2 power 32, I think. So based on that we have this. Okay, next we have something called a float. This is also a number but with decimal point. Okay, aka it means like 1.43 something, you know, the pi value 3.14, etc. These kind of values we generally store in float. The third value is which we called a character. Okay, character generally refers to some sort of only single letter, number, symbol, even space. That's all. Okay, so it is generally denoted with this single quotation mark, any space, let us say number. So these and ABCD, lowercase and uppercase, all of them are basically known as characters, but only one thing will come. Okay, only when one comes we call it a character. Okay, but what if we want more than one? Then that is what we call a string. String is denoted using the double quotes, and whenever we have one and one or more, it is called a string. Simple. It can also be defined basically as a collection of character. Okay, you can have a single character as string or multiple character as string. Okay, finally we have something called boolean. It's a simple true or false value. Okay, the core part itself might not look very useful, but because of this boolean we have many concepts that are useful in coding, like if conditions, the for loops. We have used it almost everywhere in coding. It's a very simple concept, but once you understand how it works, there are a lot of things you can do with it. Okay, now these are the like 5 main basic core data types. Now these two have int and float do have few sub data types. For example, in int we have something called short and long. Short generally decreases the size of integer from like 2.1 trillion to minus 32,000 to 32,000, and long similarly increases the int size. We have also something called as signed int and unsigned. Okay, signed int generally refers, we can tell whether an integer is negative or positive. By default the integer will be defined as a signed int, we don't need to tell it, but if we do want to use an unsigned bit, we can add it as a keyword syntax. Okay, and similarly in float, instead of we will have double. Okay, this allows us to use more precision, so the number of numbers after the decimal point increase. By default, let us say it has 8, with the help of double we can go up to like 16. Okay, in character that's pretty much same. String, yeah, that's all. That is basically the data types. And once let's try to run few programs in C, we'll have more, it makes more sense. So let's open dev C++, control N. Okay, same as we did before, includes ddo.h. We'll have the main function. Okay, and here, so first let us see integer number. Okay, so how do I declare the integer number? For int it's very simple, the keyword is int, then we have to assign a variable. I like to call it a, equals to, let us say some number 10 and semicolon. This is the process how we initialize and store some value. Okay, now there are ways we can take user input, but first let us try to understand how we can just store this way. So here int is what we called a data type. This is already predefined. I need not to define what int is here. The C already knows, it is already written inside of C what int is. Okay, now here a is something that we tell the computer, so that okay, I want to store this so and so data in this way. Okay, so we'll know that 10 or whatever what we give here will be stored in a. Okay, and later if we update also, it will be updated in the system. Okay, equal to is what we call assignment. In programming languages, generally when we have, let's say, left and right like this, the value on the right side will be stored on the left side for single equal to. Here make sure we only have single equal to, Double equal to is something called a comparison operator, which is used for different things, not here. Okay, now let's try to print this. Okay, now I know that a is as 10, but if I cannot show that what is there inside of a, what is the point of storing it, right? So we do the printer, double quotations. Now how do we print a? Okay, if I do just a, it is the string of a, it's not the variable a. Okay, do not confuse these two things. This is a variable. Okay, you can name it anything. Generally it's good idea to name it something that we can understand easily, and later on in the code, even if we see, we know what it is. And we cannot name it using like this: integer, main, include. We cannot use these words as variable names. Also not numbers. Okay, numbers you can add them later like this, but you cannot add before a variable. Okay, so now the way we print numbers in C is a bit complicated. It is simple in other languages, but in C it's just a single additional step. We use something called %t. These are called format specifiers, and here where I have this %t, there the number will come. So let us say this. Okay, this is my line. So I have string, inside that I have a small code called %t. Here D means an integer. Okay, F means float, C means character, S means string. Okay, boolean by default C kind of doesn't show as a format specifier, so we don't need to worry about that. We generally never have to show the boolean value. Okay, so anyway, %t is for integer. Now I want a to come, so comma a. Okay, now let's just fn f11, save the file. So let us call this data types, and there 10. Okay, so now let us update 10. So I want to, let's say here we have a. Now I want to add, let's say 11 to a. Okay, here do not get confused, this 11 is added to a. Now on the right side, what is stored, will be only considering that in the previous line. For example, this a, we go to the previous lines. Here the latest a value is 10, so therefore the a value here is 10, and the total value returned here is 10 plus 11, which is 21. Hence this will be stored in this. Now when we use here, the a value is 21. When we use here, the a value is 10, and when we use here, the a value is 10. Okay, so now if I just run it again, as we can see, the value is 21. Okay, now let us say I said the where %t is, the number will come. So let us type something. So a here. Okay, now if I run, as you can see, a and 21. If I try to write something after here and run it again, as you can see, the %t, where it there. What if you give multiple %t? Then how will the system work? So let's try to do that. Here are multiple %t's. As you can see, by default it gives us something like a random value or pointer or 0. You don't have to worry about that. The order how we give here, the same way it will come. For example, I have 3 %t's here, right? Now let us try to declare few more variables. So let us take int b equals to 20, int c equals to 30. Okay, now here comma b comma c. This way, now when I run it, as you can see, for the first day, the first %t we have 10. Here I gave 2 spaces, so I got 2 spaces here, then 20, which is the second %t, and finally 30. Simple, right? So that is how you can take. Now here if you want float, you can do float c is equal to 30 point something. Okay, now when I run it in %t, as you can see, it doesn't work. For float we have to use %f. So now when I run it, as you can see, now it comes as expected. Next, let us try to print always a character. So character d is equal to some single quotation of r, as we can see. Okay, and finally in C we do not actually have the data type string. Instead we use something called array. array is basically a color homogeneous type of way to store characters, and we use that concept with character. So when we do character like this, it creates an array. We give it a name, so let us say this is E, and in this we can store something. So let us say R I H, okay, some three things, and like so. So here %C for character, and finally %S. Now A B C, D for character, and E for string. So now it's showing error. So let us say 10 is the size. Why is it an error? Yeah, there. See, as you can see, so this is what we generally refer to as string. In C itself, we have to use a character array. In remaining programages, we can actually use string as a data type. Okay, so this is the way the different data types work. Now let us try to take a simple integer input. Okay, so in C, how we take is, first we have to say where we have to store data. Okay, similarly, let us say whenever we ask something, let's say someone a number, we generally write the number down somewhere, right? But for C, we have to tell where it writes it down. Here, let us say the number we have given will be written in A. So whenever we call A, the number that C has written will come to us. So now let us take the input. Okay, for input in C, we use something called scanf. Okay, if you remember, it is the input in this. In this, similar to printf, we have to use %d comma A, but this won't work. Okay, A only works to print, but when you are want to input a data, there is one symbol called ampersand. In C, we call it as address. So here, this reads as address of A. Now what is this? Why do I have to do this? Okay, it's a very simple concept. To put it simply, our system, okay, it is basically runs on our storage, right? So let us take, this is my hard disk storage. Now this hard disk storage is, to put it simply, just a big grid of ones and zeros. Okay, so we'll have lines like this, 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 and this. Okay, so let us say this is our storage unit. Now generally what happens is, whenever you declare a variable, some portion of this area is assigned to that variable. Okay, for example, let us take A. These 4 blocks will be storing the value of A. So let us say 5 0 1 0 1. That is the binary value of 5 1 0 1. It will be stored like so in this block. Now whenever I say A, it is easy to read the data, but when you are inputting a data, the computer needs to know where it starts from. So when you say address of A, it gives the first block of this as the input. So when we type from the first block itself, based on our data entered, it will be registered in this area. So to put it simply, we are just saying in the storage unit, A is being stored in this block. So this is the block we have to enter to. That we are what we are saying here. Okay, %d is simply to say which type of data. Generally int is of 4 bytes in size. So here it will be, in realistically speaking, around like 4 times 8, so 16 bit. Okay, 16 bits, simple. So like so. So now after this we can print f and show the A value, same %d comma A. Okay, so here now if I do 3, enter, as you can see I have entered 3. If you're wondering, well, I don't know, should I enter or no, how do I know where to enter, you can also add a simple printf statement here. So let us say enter A like so, semicolon, fn f11. So now if we see, it says like so. So 3, and boom, we have 3. Simple as that. We can similarly take input for float and character. For string, it's in C we have to use a for loop. It's a bit more complicated, so I won't be discussing here. It will come in later episodes. Okay, and that is all about C. Next, let us try to do the same stuff in Python, and it is much simpler. Okay, so let me just close all of this. Let me open the PyCharm. So let's go to JetBrains PyCharm. So in case you don't have any project, it might come like this. What you want to do is simply new project, or you can do an existing project. I already created one, so we'll be using that. So here we can do print, as we already know, hello, directly. We don't need to import any libraries in C. Okay, let's wait a bit, let this update. Okay, there, all that has been set. Now similarly in C we can take A equals to 10 and it will be done, B equals to 1.5 and boom, it's done. C equals to string of R, D equals to string of something, and we can print it. So print A comma B comma C comma D, boom. It's that easy in Python. Really, it's very easy in Python. I don't have to say what is A, I don't need semicolons. Python just knows everything by itself. It identifies and does it. Okay, so now there are few advanced things also. As you can see, it's pretty much same: integer, float, string, character and string. Okay, now if you are wondering how can we do, let's say, what is that? Yeah, the main difference here is for integer there is no limit. For example, if I do this, there, a small number. Okay, so now if I just to print A, it will print just fine. So let us to print A plus 1. As you can see, the 1 has been increased. It works just fine. In Python there is no limit for integer, and that is why it is very powerful for tasks like AML and etc., where lot of the time the limitation of numbers does limit the system on what it is capable of doing. Okay, so now let us see how to take input. In Python we use input to take input. Well, how does that work? A equals to, we type input, input, quotation, and boom, that's enough to take an input. So run here, 1 here. Well, how do I know what input? Print A. Simple. We print the A. Now here let us do 1, boom, I have 1. Let us do this, I have that. But remember how we added the enter? Here we need not to write a print before, we can actually write inside of the input itself. So string enter A, and there you go, you can enter. So Rishi, boom, it's that simple. Do keep in mind here, the by default all the inputs will be taken as string, not a specified data type. So do keep in mind, if you do want a number, we have to later change it to number. There are two ways to change it. First is by directly making int function. Okay, when you do this int parameters, we convert whatever input into an integer and then store it as A. So then we can perform mathematical calculations. On string we cannot do that. So now if I do, let's say 4, there we have 4. Now if I do, let's say plus 5, like 4, I do get 9. But if I do not have this integer, I won't be able to perform that. See, as you can see, it has an error. This is one simple difference between Python and C. In C we can choose what type of input before itself, so we don't really have to worry about these things, but in Python we cannot do that. Okay, so that is all for today. Next, the topics are if condition, oops, function and return, array list, and so on. Once you have learned data types, you can learn these codes as we code for problems and stuff. So I'll be following these Prep Insta top 100 codes to do some example codes. Okay, they are really in the beginning few are simple, few are complicated, but once you do them enough, it is really easy. So right now I will just have a run rough down. You can learn in detail when we are coding in the next episodes. Okay, so first we have if condition. Let us go to the W3 school. If condition there. So if condition, simply we'll have if, okay, in the parenthesis we'll have one condition. When this is true, we'll execute some code. If it isn't true, it will generally be executed in block, in else block. If there is no else block, these lines will be simply skipped. Okay, nothing will be executed. Okay, that is simply the if else. Next we have while loop and for loop. While loop, while this condition is true, the lines inside this code will be ran again and again. For loop, it is similar to while loop, but instead of the condition, we'll have a set number of iteration or some sort of rule based on 3 expressions. So according to the count of this expression, a fixed number of times it will be executed. Okay, there is nested loop. It's nothing but a loop within a loop. These kind of makes more sense when we do data structures or matrix, or once we start dealing with arrays. Okay, so after we have function. Okay, function is simply let us say I wrote like 100 lines of code. Okay, but these 100 lines of code I want to reuse them again and again. For example, let us call it, it's a simple let us say I want to simply find the root of some equation. Okay, to write a code, the quadratic equation, trying to find a solution, it generally takes around, let's say, 30 lines. Okay, but if I have to write 30 lines again and again, it does take pretty time consuming and lot of space in my coding file. So instead what you do is something called a function. So if you do define function roots like so, you can write some code here. Okay, so let's say roots are these. So let us say this is 100 lines. Okay, so for example, for I in range of 100, print code. Okay, so now when I just run this, it won't execute. But if I come down here and I call these roots instead of writing this entire thing. Okay, let us assume this is an 100 lines. So now instead of writing those 100 lines, I can just simply call it using one line. Okay, now you might say, well, there is nothing special about this, right? But when you have to use it like 100 times, this single line becomes very effective. So the comparison is either you have to write this 100 lines 100 times, or you can write this 100 line one time and just few 100 more lines. So this is like writing this 100 times is like 10,000 lines, where this is just like what, 200 lines. So that's the difference. And then finally we have arrays and list. It is simply a way of storing data. Instead of like variables, if we want to store 100 or more data, it kind of gets pretty annoying if you have to create a variable for each and everything and person or whatever. So there it's better to use arrays. It makes more sense when we in the next class, in the next episode, I'll talk about it. Okay, and finally we have few things like pointer, structure, oops. These I'll refer to them as like program specific. For example, in Python you can use something like NumPy, TensorFlow, where it only works in Python. They kind of don't really work in other languages, and they're not built for other languages. In C, let us say we have something called pointers. It's only there in C, not in other languages, and so on. Okay, so these are few websites. Depending on how you start, this is the way you want to go. You want to first start with syntax. So this, once you learn these, you can start solving problems and code. And the way you want to do this is kind of try to set a timer. So let us say 30-minute timer. Okay, you try to solve. Okay, if you can't solve, learn the code and do and repeat. That's all. So once you do like let's say 100 codes, then you understand the basic coding logic, then you can start doing more and more complex. So next you can go to hacker rank. You can try to, generally I would say, at least try to get 4 stars before you go into DSA, okay, in one set programming languages, okay, in one set programming language. And finally we have lead code, which is like probably the hardest thing, personally speaking. It is all about basically data structures. So what is the point of lead code? Lead code is a simple site where it has bunch of data structure problems where every day some code will be added. So the main point of this is, first you want to solve few easy things to get used to solving this stuff. Once you do that, you want to learn to solve these medium problems within 45 minutes. Okay, when you are able to solve consistently medium problems within 45 minutes, you can basically crack almost any top tech company interviews. It is really that simple. So that's how that's all for this video. Next I will be starting few codes on this prep insta code and going in detail on each of these concepts. Okay,